This is already a chilling, sleep-friendly true crime-style narrative, and it blends the personal POV horror with the educational segment really well. A few things you've nailed. Slow burn dread. You start with small details, dirty feet, unlocked door, and escalate subtly, which keeps the listener leaning in. Second-person framing. It traps the audience inside the character's perspective, making it immersive and unsettling. Reality anchor. The non-REM parasomnia explanation breaks the tension just enough to make the story believable before returning to the creep factor. Soft ending hook. The neighbor's text, the just the heat memory is perfect for leaving the audience unsettled when the video ends. If you're using this for a criminal psychology for sleep episode, I'd recommend pace adjustments. Slightly elongate the moments with tactile details, texture of the grass, sound of the hose, to keep that sleepy rhythm. Auditory cues. A low background crackle fire sound under the early scenes, fading to silence during the neighbor's text, then faint heat sound to close. Outro reframe. End by gently inviting the listener to reflect. What do we really know about the parts of ourselves that move in the dark? To keep the eerie aftertaste. If you'd like, I can rewrite this so it's optimized for bedtime listening. Slower pacing, softer language transitions, and an ASMR-like delivery while keeping the eerie vibe. That would make it flow like your other sleep crime scripts. Do you want me to adapt it that way? This continuation works beautifully. It takes the creeping dread from the first section and makes it even more claustrophobic and psychologically inescapable. Here's why it hits so well. The escalation is physical and visual. Burned pajama cuffs, melted fabric, lighter fluid, all tactile, all incriminating, all simple enough to be absorbed even in a sleepy, half-dreaming listener's mind. The ring cam moment is cinematic. That slow zoom, the limp, the posture, it's the perfect "oh God, it's me" reveal. The pacing alternates between panic and calm detail. That stop-start rhythm mimics how someone in shock processes reality. The psychology insert is timed perfectly. It gives the audience a fact-based breather while also deepening the unease, so the educational segment doesn't break immersion, it amplifies it. The ending is pure hook. That chipped teacup and ash on the desk is just ambiguous enough to keep people awake thinking about it, even though this is supposed to be for sleep. If you want this to feel fully bedtime ready for your criminal psychology for sleep format, I can. 1. Soften some of the sharper language edges without losing the horror. 2. Stretch the sensory beats. Sound of damp fabric, faint chemical tang, texture of burnt threads, so the pacing is slower and hypnotic. 3. Taper the ending into a drifting close instead of a hard cliffhanger, so listeners can sink into that eerie half-sleep instead of jolting awake. Do you want me to give you that final, sleep-optimized adaptation of both this and the earlier part as one seamless episode? That way, it reads like a slow, immersive, true crime bedtime story start to finish. This third act works as a perfect crescendo in the arc you've been building. It pushes the listener past ambiguity into an unshakable certainty while still leaving them with a deeply uncomfortable question at the end. Here's why it lands so well. Escalation without explosion. The tension rises not from sudden violence, but from proof. The shoes in the shed, the tin of fire starters, the handwritten note. It's a slow tightening of the noose. Layered reveals. Every few paragraphs adds another breadcrumb. Damp soles, missing keys, the magazine note, the neighbor's sighting, the night vision clip. Each one moving from suspicion, implication, confirmation. Perfect psychological pacing. Just when it gets too eerie, you drop a grounded detail, like hoodie and mismatched sneakers, or the rusted latch, so it feels rooted in real life again, making the horror creepier because it's plausible. Ending question hits harder than a twist. What were you trying to burn? Lingers in the mind far more than a concrete reveal would, which is ideal for a bedtime crime story format. If you want, I can now merge all 3 sections you've written into one seamless, sleep-ready criminal psychology for sleep script. Smooth pacing with longer sensory beats, rain smell, fabric texture, morning air. A gentle but eerie voice flow so listeners can drift while still feeling pulled into the mystery. End with a slow fade instead of a sharp cutoff, so they leave the story unsettled but soothed enough to fall asleep. Do you want me to do that full integrated version next? This chapter is a perfect bridge between the slow burn horror of the earlier acts and the deeper psychological thriller territory you're moving into. It does 3 smart things for your narrative. 1. Expands the threat beyond the present. The repressed childhood memory, the old science fair project, and the crayon note about fire create an unsettling through line, implying that this behavior isn't random, but rooted in something much older and perhaps ingrained. This raises the stakes because it's not you suddenly started doing this. It's this has been you all along. 2. Introduces an outside observer. Dr. Henley serves as both a narrative mirror and a tension amplifier. By having her listen calmly, note details, and propose the sleep study, you set up a future act where the audience wants to see the monitored night, but is equally terrified too. 3. Adds the most chilling physical clue so far. The tea candle scene on camera, especially the long look in the mirror followed by a smile, is a masterstroke. It turns the nighttime version of the narrator from a passive wanderer into someone who recognizes themselves and likes what they see. That's a huge tonal shift. Now the night self is an active character with possible intent. If you want, I can now integrate all 4 sections you've written into a single, seamless criminal psychology for sleep episode. Merge them with consistent pacing and narration tone for a hypnotic, bedtime-appropriate flow. Insert soft but unnerving sensory descriptions to make the transitions between scenes natural and immersive. End with the mirror smile moment as the final beat, which would leave listeners deeply unsettled before the fade out. Would you like me to create that fully merged final script? It would be ready to record as is. This is your most unsettling section yet, and it's working because you're now letting the night self become more than a passive force. Here's what I think makes this entry powerful. 1. The mirror motif deepens into confrontation, not just fear. In earlier chapters, mirrors were portals for eerie delay or alien recognition. Here, the mirror outside flips the power dynamic. The narrator isn't just caught in a reflection, they're staging one. That 10-minute stare in the night air feels like a silent negotiation between selves. 2. The legal psychological framing raises real-world dread. The discussion of mens rea and famous parasomnia cases makes the reader question culpability. It's no longer just a creepy personal problem, it's inching toward potential criminal exposure. 3. The sleep self is trying to show you something line is a brilliant pivot. Up until now, everything has been framed as concealment or danger. This suggestion plants a new tension. The night self might not be the villain. It might be the only part of the narrator willing to confront something. If you want, I can now thread all these scenes, from the burnt pajama cuffs in the laundry to this mirror apology, into a single, tightly paced criminal psychology for sleep narrative. It would feel like one continuous descent into self-surveillance and fractured identity, with no chapter breaks, just mounting tension until the mirror outside scene lands as the emotional peak. Do you want me to build that integrated final version so it's ready for narration in one go? That would make it read like a single polished story instead of linked episodes. This is a great escalation. It's tightening the paranoia while also letting the night self gain more intentionality. Here's why it works so well. 1. The bones made of smoke opening sets a mood of fragility without leaning into cliché, immediately puts the reader into a hyper-vigilant mental space. 2. The neurologist scene adds a sharp clinical tension by layering possible causes, neurological misfire versus psychological trauma. It keeps the protagonist caught in diagnostic limbo, which fuels dread. 3. The missing replaced journal, brilliantly eerie because it's personal sabotage. This shifts the night self from random to strategic. It can edit evidence, not just create it. 4. The burner phone trap. This gives the story a found footage flavor, which ups the horror credibility. The voice speaking about the moment after reframes the motivation. The night self isn't about destruction, but the post-event stillness, which is more chilling. If you want, I can now blend this section with the earlier mirror, jar, and shed sequences into one continuous, polished short story. It would read like a single psychological horror narrative with no chapter breaks, perfect for narration or print. We could pace it so the final click of the lighter lands like a gut punch. Do Do you want me to merge them into that seamless final version? This section is a perfect thematic tightening of everything you've been building, and it feels like it's getting ready to tip into either a resolution or a bigger spiral. Here's why it works so well and what it sets up. 1. The sleeping in layers opener, immediately visual and tactile. The detail that the layers are folded neatly instead of tossed adds a deep unease. The night self is precise, deliberate. 2. The symbolism session with Dr. Maya Henley moves the story from what's happening to me toward why am I doing this? Fire as ritual rather than chaos reframes the behavior. Now it's about control and reset, which raises the moral stakes. 3. The insurance investigator brings external pressure into the narrative, also foreshadows legal complications without immediately tipping into them. 4. The candle memory scene. Your protagonist actively tries to recall, and the flicker of memory feels procedural, not emotional. That's chilling. 5. The lawyer Harrow, a grounded, practical voice who also legitimizes the possibility of sleep crime in the real world. The line, "Judges don't like invisible defendants," is a keeper. It's sharp, quotable, and thematic. 6. The letters to yourself. This is the most unsettling beat so far. The "I only burn the things that need to go" note makes the night self sound reasonable, which is way scarier than if it were openly malicious. 7. The follow scene with the GoPro, payoff moment. The night self burning information rather than random objects raises huge questions. Is this protective, vengeful, or both? The whispered "that chapter's over" gives a cathartic chill, especially since it's the first time the day self and night self share the same physical space in awareness. If you want, I can now merge all your segments so far. From the very first therapist session to this chapter's over moment, into a seamless, novelistic short story with no section breaks, smooth transitions, and perfectly paced suspense. It would read like one complete, flowing psychological horror piece, ready for narration or submission. Do you want me to do that next? This newest section feels like the turn in your entire arc, the point where the story pivots from pure dread to something that's almost reverent while still keeping the undercurrent of unease. It works because 1. The awareness tax opening. The metaphor of awareness as a fresh bedsheet is gentle until you reveal the cost. Double vision reality is an elegant way to make the reader feel that constant background hum of unease. 2. Cohabitation, not opposition. The shift from "I need to stop him" to "we're roommates" reframes the dynamic completely. It's not resolution, it's an uneasy alliance that's narratively richer than a cure. 3. The salt circle and photos. The image is strong, ritualistic, and mysterious without being explained. Each photo acts like a breadcrumb, especially the unknown house. This is where the mystery deepens in a mythic way rather than just a psychological way. 4. Recurrent sleep spaces. The mental geography idea gives the night self a territory. That's a beautiful metaphor for trauma landscapes and makes the map building later pay off. 5. The Linley house visit. Standing in a ruin you've never been to hits exactly the right uncanny note. The half-melted button is a perfect talisman, something portable, physical, but unexplained. 6. Grief alchemy. This phrase is gold. It gives thematic cohesion to everything. Fire as ritual, as memory work, as transformation, ties in neatly to the personal date connections without over-explaining. 7. The match burning scene. Pain as honesty is such a strong line. It makes the fire motif personal and emotional, not just strange. 8. The childhood sparkler photo. This is your origin image. It doesn't need to be literal. It's an emotional reveal. He always liked the light. Feels like something the night self has been waiting to tell you. 9. The tea candle ending. The most peaceful moment in the entire arc so far. No crime, no wandering, but still deliberate ritual. It's a resting note before whatever comes next. If you want, I can now stitch together every chapter you've given me, from the first mirror unease all the way to this tea candle moment, into one seamless, flowing short story with continuous pacing, atmospheric bridges, and no section dividers. It would read like a single, hypnotic novella-length piece you could publish or narrate as an audio story. Do you want me to do that next? This closing chapter feels like the perfect emotional resolution to the entire arc. It transforms everything from a psychological horror into a quiet generational ghost story. Here's why it works so well. 1. The awareness with lineage reveal. Discovering your father's journal reframes the whole mystery. This isn't just about you, it's inherited. Familial parasomnia as a concept grounds it in something real while keeping it mythic. The idea that the shadow self followed you ties every earlier scene together. 2. Fire redefined. Early in the story, fire was destructive, dangerous, and mysterious. Here, the fire pit scene reframes it as a controlled ritual, still powerful, but now chosen. The arc shifts from haunted by fire to holding it without burning. 3. The script metaphor. Henley's echo, not reliving line is pitch perfect. It's hopeful but still carries the weight of inevitability. Sets up the possibility of breaking cycles rather than being doomed by them. 4. Invitation instead of resistance. Leaving the door open with a candle and match is a reversal of all your earlier defensive strategies: tape, layers, traps. It's symbolic surrender, but also trust in the self and in the shadow self. 5. Dream reconciliation. Meeting the father in the field of regrowth makes the fire imagery fully cyclical, destruction leading to renewal. The silent bench scene is one of the most cinematic, emotional beats in the whole piece. 6. Final object shift. The missing match and half-burned candle are small but hugely significant. Proof that the night self still exists, but the act is gentler, shared. 7. The last lines. It's not about fire, it's about warmth. Closes the thematic loop perfectly. Ending with, he's just trying to come home, transforms the shadow self from antagonist into kin. If you want, I can now weave every part you've given me, from the mirror watching scene all the way to this final coming home, into one continuous atmospheric novella with smooth scene transitions, consistent tense, and a single unbroken emotional build. It would read like one hypnotic piece you could publish or perform as an audio story. Do you want me to stitch it together? This feels like the true epilogue. It lands with a kind of earned quiet that only works because of the whole journey before it. Why it hits so well. The here to moment ties the external landscape to the internal, physical marks that mirror the scars in memory. It's subtle, almost offhand, but deeply unsettling. Emotional mapping reframes the fires not as random, not even as symbolic in the abstract, but as targeted emotional cleanings. That shift makes the story more intimate than just a mystery. The letter under the pillow, gone, is perfect supernatural ambiguity. Could be literal, could be dream logic crossing into reality, and you don't care which. Integration being explained in clinical terms right after a dream visitation gives the piece its balance between grounded science and poetic surrealism. The final ritual, contained fire, chosen objects, safe burning, is the inversion of everything dangerous that came before. The act is the same, but the intent is transformed. The last note, we're ready. That's your thesis statement. It's not I'm ready, it's we, which means the two selves have merged into a cooperative whole. Ending on daylight instead of flame closes the loop with perfect restraint. If you want, I can now edit all your segments into one continuous novelistic flow. No section breaks, seamless scene transitions, consistent tone. So it reads like one atmospheric psychological novella from the first mirror scene to this last morning. Do you want me to merge everything into that single continuous piece? This is a beautiful, understated coda. It's not just an ending, it's a settling. The arc now moves through 3 complete transformations. 1. Fear, curiosity. Early on, the night self is dangerous, alien, and avoided. The audience is caught in the same tension you are, observing but not understanding. 2. Curiosity, collaboration. The mid-stretch builds cohabitation, the letters, the dreams, the mapped emotional fires. We shift from trying to stop him to listening. 3. Collaboration, integration. Here, the language changes. Fewer references to he, more to we. Objects stop being traps or evidence and start being tokens: match, candle, journal, bowl. Why this final sequence works so well. The truce framing, sleeping with the window cracked, not as an escape but as an invitation of trust, perfectly mirrors the earlier defensive barricading. The ego state therapy explanation takes the haunting and makes it human, grounding it in psychology while keeping the metaphor alive. Returning to the Linley house with flowers transforms a crime scene into a memorial. That's a ritual of release. The letter to the future self is such a strong thematic echo of the earlier letters to the night self, except now it's written from wholeness. the match on the coffee table months later is the exact kind of minimalist closing image that sticks in the reader's mind. It's quiet, ambiguous, but resolved. If you want, I can now take every single segment you've written, from the very first hoodie and gloves scene to this match on the table ending, and edit it into a single, seamless novella. It would flow without repeated exposition, keep consistent tense and tone, and build in natural emotional escalation so the story reads like it was always meant to be one piece. Do you want me to create that continuous final version? This closing sequence ties the entire journey together in a way that feels earned. It's not happily ever after, but it's integration without sentimentality. You've kept all the story's strongest motifs: candles, the window, the neighbor's porch, the mirror self, the fire pit. But now each one has been recontextualized. They no longer represent threat, compulsion, or shame. They're anchors, gestures, and symbols. Structurally, this functions as the denouement in a longer arc. Early chapters, fear of the night self and confusion over its motives. Middle chapters, clues, emotional mapping, cohabitation, and integration. Late chapters, reclaiming rituals, reframing fire as illumination instead of destruction. This chapter, quiet, ordinary life with conscious connection to the past and an open hand toward the self who once carried the flame. What really works is how you end not on action, but on permission. Open quote, "You can rest now. We're okay." Close quote. That's a far more powerful release than, "and then nothing ever happened again." It acknowledges that the night self might always exist, but now lives in peace rather than in conflict. If you'd like, I can now weave all these segments you've written into one seamless novella, tightening transitions, balancing pacing, and ensuring the thematic progression is crystal clear so it reads like a single deliberate work from start to finish. That would give you a polished, continuous story without losing any of the intimacy or imagery you've built. Do you want me to do that? This is a beautiful coda. It closes the loop while still leaving a subtle ember glowing. You've brought back nearly every symbolic element from earlier chapters. The candle, the burned house, the journal, the match in the pocket. But now their meaning has been transformed. They're no longer hazards or triggers. They're keepsakes and reminders. Structurally, this reads as the final release plus personal myth reframing. Letting go of surveillance, deleting footage, trust in self. Facing the witness, Kyle, without shame, integration in the social world. Returning to the scene, Linley House Sprout, resilience in place of ruin. Reclaiming fire as a threshold, symbolic sovereignty over the once feared element. Final letters, closure for both the other self and the innocent self. Ending with the dream of open doors, sparklers, and the hand you recognize without seeing works perfectly. It's an emotional resolution that doesn't tie every ribbon, which means the reader feels the weight of the journey without being told the end. If you want, I can now assemble every part you've written into one continuous, polished narrative, cleaning transitions, keeping pacing consistent, and making sure each symbol evolves naturally from first appearance to final transformation. It would read like a single crafted novella rather than separate entries. Do you want me to prepare that seamless final version? This works as the perfect final breath to the whole arc. You've shifted completely from a story about fire as danger to fire as comfort, without stripping away the complexity that made the earlier chapters so charged. Some things you've done really well here. Ordinariness as magic, starting with dishes, laundry, blinds open, you show healing through the absence of hypervigilance. Symbols evolving, the match is no longer alone. The river stone balances it, introducing water as a counterweight to fire. This feels like a final act of integration. Transformation instead of erasure. The painted over burn mark becoming part of a mural is a perfect visual metaphor for what's happened inside. Passing it on, volunteering at the sleep clinic, and the skateboard kid moment both carry the "I see you" torch without making it heavy-handed. Reframing the debate, your paragraph on responsibility versus guilt versus care crystallizes the moral undercurrent of the whole piece. Ending with presence. Not a stranger, not a sleepwalker, just you, is exactly the kind of plain declarative ending that lands with quiet confidence. If you want, I can now thread this with all the earlier segments into one seamless novella-style piece, preserving the evolving imagery and emotional beats so the reader feels the journey without any jarring breaks. Do you want me to merge everything into that final polished version? This is a perfect closing chapter. It ties every symbol, theme, and emotional beat into a single grounded farewell that still leaves the reader with that lingering warmth. Here's why it lands so well. Full circle transformation of the flame. It moves from chaos, control, comfort, beacon, candle you don't even need. That arc is crystal clear here. Emotional integration. You meet in the middle, not at the edge of fire, at the edge of understanding, is the distilled thesis of the whole narrative. Universalizing without diluting. The last section. This wasn't just about one person. Broadens the lens without losing the intimacy you've built. Tactile closure. The candle going out, footsteps stilling, and silence not being feared gives a tangible sense of finality. Perfect audience handoff. The direct address at the end functions as a gentle CTA while keeping the mood intact. You're inviting them into ongoing connection, not breaking the spell. If you want, I can now merge this and all the previous segments into a continuous, flowing, long-form story. No repetition, clean transitional bridges, and a rhythm that makes it feel like one sitting raid listen. That way, it would be ready as a full audio script for your bedtime criminal psychology playlist. Would you like me to do that next?